I am 60 years old now, and there are moments in life that still surprise me. Moments that shake you to the core, even when you think you have seen it all. For most of my marriage, I believed I knew everything about my husband. He was a kind man, hardworking, never complaining, always putting food on the table, always keeping our family steady like the roots of a great tree. I thought I understood him completely. But sometimes love hides secrets, not to deceive but to protect. Every month on the very same day, he would put on his coat, slip an envelope into his pocket, and walk out quietly. I used to ask, "Where are you going?" And he would smile, that soft, gentle smile, and reply, "It's just something I need to do." His answer never changed. First, I didn't think much of it. I trusted him. He was never the kind of man to cause suspicion. But as the years went on, I noticed the pattern. Always the same day. Always the same envelope. Always the same silence. And deep down, a part of me wondered what secret he was carrying. When he passed away, grief swallowed me whole. For days I couldn't open his drawers, couldn't touch his belongings. Felt too raw, too final. But one evening as I was cleaning, I found a small box in the back of his wardrobe. Inside were letters, receipts, and small notes, records of money he had been sending every single month. And on one of the envelopes there was a name. His sister. I froze. My hands trembled as I held the papers, my heart pounding in my chest. For 40 years, he had been sending money to his sister. Quietly. Faithfully. Without ever telling me. I sat there on the floor, the papers spread around me, whispering to myself, "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you hide this from me?" At that moment I felt confusion, even hurt. Was there a part of his life I was never allowed to see? Was I not worthy of his trust? But then, another thought crept into my mind. Maybe he had a reason. Maybe he was protecting me. Still, I couldn't rest until I knew the truth. So I made a decision. I would go to her. I would meet the woman who had quietly received my husband's help for decades. And now let me ask you something, my dear listener. If you were in my place, if you discovered your husband had been sending money to someone else in secret, what would you feel? Would you feel betrayed? Or would you search for the truth before passing judgment? Tell me honestly, because I know how heavy that moment can feel. I still remember the day I decided to go. My heart was heavy, my mind restless. For nights I couldn't sleep, thinking about the letters and the money. Every time I looked at his chair by the window, empty and silent, I wanted to ask him, "Why did you hide this from me?" But no matter how many times I whispered it, I only heard my own voice echo back. Finally, I folded the letters, placed them gently in my purse, and set out to find her. It wasn't an easy journey. She lived far from the city, in a quiet little town I had never visited. The streets grew narrower, the houses smaller, until I reached a place where life seemed slower, simpler, yet filled with struggle. When I knocked on her door, my hands trembled. I didn't know what to expect. Would she even welcome me? Would she be angry, ashamed, or surprised? But when the door creaked open, I saw a frail woman with soft, tired eyes. She was older than I had imagined, her hair streaked with gray, her body bent slightly from the weight of years. She looked at me, puzzled at first, and then her face softened. "You must be my brother's wife," she said, her voice trembling as though she already knew why I had come. I stepped inside, and the sight before me broke my heart. The house was small, the furniture old and worn, the walls bare except for a few photographs. It was the home of someone who had lived with less than enough, someone who had stretched every coin to survive. We sat at the table and I finally asked her, "All these years he sent you money. Why didn't either of you tell me?" Her eyes welled with tears as she reached across the table and held my hand. "Because he didn't want you to worry. He said you already carried enough for your family. He wanted to protect you from my struggles." She went on to tell me her story. She had been widowed young, left with 3 children to raise on her own. Jobs were scarce and she often worked long hours doing whatever she could, cleaning, sewing, selling vegetables, just to keep food on the table. But no matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. "Your husband," she said softly, "was my lifeline. Every month that envelope meant my children could eat, that I could pay for school books, that I could keep a roof over our heads. He never once failed me. Not even when times were hard for him, too. He was my brother, but more than that, he was my protector." I sat there in silence, tears streaming down my face. All the confusion I had felt turned into something else, pride, love, and sorrow all at once. I realized then that his secret wasn't meant to hurt me. It was meant to spare me from the weight of another family's suffering. I thought back to all the times he would come home tired but peaceful. All the times he would sit quietly with his Bible, never saying much about his day. He had carried this responsibility in silence, never once asking for recognition, never once letting it overshadow the life we built together. His sister looked at me and whispered, "He was a good man. He gave me dignity when life had taken it away. I never wanted to be a burden to you. That's why he kept it between us." In that moment I understood him more deeply than I ever had while he was alive. He had been a man who gave love not just in words but in actions. Quiet, consistent, unshakable actions. When I left her house that day, I carried with me more than just answers. I carried a new piece of my husband's heart, a piece I had never known before. And now I ask you, my dear listener, have you ever discovered something about someone you loved only after they were gone? Something that changed the way you saw them forever? If you have, you know that pain and beauty can live in the same moment. When I returned home from meeting his sister, I placed my purse on the table and sat in silence. The house felt different that evening, not emptier but fuller, as if my husband's presence had returned through the stories she had shared. I opened the box of letters again, spread them across the table, and ran my fingers over the faded ink. Each one was proof of his sacrifice, his love, his faithfulness. For years I thought I knew everything about the man I married. And I did know him. His laughter, his quiet habits, his gentle way of holding my hand when life felt heavy. But now I realized there was another layer, a part of him that belonged not only to me, but to the people he had silently protected. He had carried two families on his shoulders, never once letting either one feel the weight. I wept that night, but it wasn't the same kind of grief as before. These were tears of gratitude, of love renewed. My sorrow was no longer empty. It was filled with meaning. He had lived a life of service, a life of giving, and I had been blessed to be loved by such a man. The next morning I made a decision. I took one of the envelopes from his box, placed money inside, and wrote his sister's name on the front. My hands trembled as I sealed it, but in my heart, I knew this was the right thing. If he had given faithfully while he was alive, I would continue in his honor. His legacy would not end with him. When I visited her again and handed her the envelope, she began to cry. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. But I held her hand and replied, "I know I don't have to. I want to, because this is what he would have wanted." And love doesn't end when a life ends. It carries forward as long as we choose to carry it. From that day onward, every month I sent her something. Not just money but time, visits, warmth. Slowly, her home began to feel like mine too. Her children, now grown, began to call me their second mother. And I realized something profound. Sometimes the family we inherit through love is just as precious as the family we are born into. I began telling my grandchildren about their grandfather's hidden generosity. First they were surprised, even shocked. But then they grew proud, their eyes lighting up as they realized they came from a man whose love extended beyond what was visible. One evening my eldest grandson asked me, "Grandma, why didn't Grandpa ever tell anyone?" I smiled softly and answered, "Because true love doesn't need applause. He didn't do it to be praised. He did it because it was the right thing to do." That answer seemed to stay with them, and I hope it will guide them long after I am gone, because that is what legacy truly is. Not money, not property, not possessions, but the example we leave behind. And now, my dear listener, I want to turn to you. Think for a moment. Do you know someone in your life who quietly carries burdens you don't see? Someone who gives without asking for thanks, who sacrifices without recognition. Maybe it's a parent, maybe a friend, maybe even you. If you do, take a moment to honor them, because people like that are rare. They are the silent heroes of our world. The ones whose names may never appear in headlines, but whose love shapes generations. I am 60 years old now, and though my husband is gone, his story lives on through me. Each time I send an envelope, each time I hold his sister's hand, I feel him near. And I know without a shadow of doubt that love, true love, does not vanish when a person dies. It lives in actions, in choices, in the way we continue what they started. So here is my message to you. Never underestimate the quiet sacrifices of the people you love. And when your time comes, make sure you leave behind something more than possessions. Leave behind love, kindness, and faithfulness, because those are the treasures that never fade. This is my story. The story of a husband who gave in silence, a sister who survived through his help, and a wife who discovered the truth only after it was too late. But instead of regret, I now live with gratitude. For I was loved by a man whose heart was larger than I ever knew. And I promise you this love, when it is true, always finds a way to keep living, even after death.